Okay, guys, we are going to do an in-class project today, and it's going to definitely pertain to your final project, the zoo project. So, earlier in the semester, we sort of looked at different ways to sort of create sort of clean icons, make things legible. We know in this project that you have three crossed animals that you have to do for signage, and then a main animal as a feature enclosure. So that can be either iconic or illustrative. Also has to have a write-up about the animal, the name of your zoo. I will provide you an introduction to the zoo itself. But I thought today what we would do is just sort of look at ways that I sort of go about approaching these things. So when you're thinking about your animals, some of the things that you really want to consider is do the animals, are the animals that I have chosen recognizable enough that I can really simplify the shapes. And so what I've done is showing you a little bit how I work with these types of things. So this is kind of a simplified version of what I would do for this. Typically, I would pull sort of 4 or 5 examples of animals I was going to do. So if I was going to do a rhino, for instance, I would probably have 4 or 5 images of the rhino just so I can look and figure out what are the main characteristics. And sometimes they look a little bit different. So sometimes you can pull one photograph and it'll look like very different from what an average rhino will look like. So what we're actually trying to do is average out what these animals look like, simplify them, and then I'm not going to get into the combining them with another animal just yet. Simply looking today, looking at more of a stylized, iconic illustration style. So the in-class exercise today will be to create 3 banners using these 3 animals. And on those banners, we have to have obviously an image of each animal, and then we're going to look at 2 different ways to create text on these animals. So we're going to pretend like we have to put the name of the animal and a write-up of the animal, just so we can look at simple ways to incorporate text that works with the image but also works as part of our design. So the things that we are going to be trying to balance out today is creating 3 stylized iconic illustrations in Illustrator, using a simple 3-color palette and adding text to each one of these banners. So these banners are going to end up being 11 inches and 11 by 20, just like our poster project. We're going to create them in Illustrator, and I'm going to take you through some very basic ways that I approach these. So the first thing I do is I sketch these things out, and I try and figure out how can I make all 3 of these sort of have the same sort of look and feel. So with this one, what I've sketched out is really sort of elongating the features that make them sort of iconic, and as well looking at ways that they are all going to have sort of similar poses, which is why I've sort of chosen 3 images to sort of use where they're all sort of looking the same direction. That will give us consistency. So I've already sort of sketched out what I want to do with the 3 animals, and I sort of have it sitting here. I haven't scanned it in. Sometimes I scan it in and bring it on my artboard. Sometimes I literally will do like 10 sketches, have it sitting in front of me, and then work from that. But pretty much I have a good idea of what I'm going to do. So really what I'm going to start with is relatively elongating some of the features on each one of these animals. So you can see what I've done here is just sort of brought my rhino to the front. I've also decided on 3 colors here. So my 3 banners are going to be using these 3 colors, and I'll interchange them, and I will use white primarily for things like type. So since I have those, I'm going to sort of sit them up here. Now, one of the things I noticed right away about this rhino is I am going to really try and do each one of these banners just using the elements of the head. So we know that banners are quite narrow and quite long. That tells me that I somehow have to do these illustrations and have them actually work on a long vertical format. So right away, I know that I'm going to have to just focus in on the head. So if I sort of just draw myself some guides, one of the things I'll do right off the bat is really think about how this thing is going to fit within the banner itself. So I'll just roughly put in some guides that are proportional to the actual size of the banners. I know that I'm going to have type elements in there, but my first job is to really sort of break down the rhino. I've sketched it out. I've got just the head sort of ready to go. So in my sketches, what I've done is I've tried to flatten this head out to be more of a silhouette. I really don't want to get into dimensional illustration on something as simple as a banner. So what we're going to work on today is understanding how flat illustration can actually work really nicely with changes in color and shape. So this is the type of illustration and sort of icon where I know that in this case I really can't just do it with shape. So if it was anything different, I would start with shapes. But with this one, relatively, just working off my sketches, I know that I'm gonna come right to the edge here. So I'm going to use the pen tool, and the first thing I'm going to do is really just try and get the understanding of the shape of this rhino's head. And I am going to use this sort of downward, this sort of head angled downward for 2 reasons. This is often what the rhinos, when he's walking or she's walking, this is really the position of a head of an animal walking, especially a rhino. It's got a big heavy head and it's quite long. So you never see this thing flat. That works in a couple ways, because what I'm able to do is I'm able to angle it downwards on our banner. So I will probably start by putting a point up around the top, and of course all of these things will change as I go. And the next thing I'm going to do is you can see that it has 2 humps, so I'm going to start by just doing kind of a long arc, and then you can see I'm bending it with my toggle. And so this type of thing is what I want to keep really clean and tight. I don't want a bunch of bumps on here, because what we're trying to do is reduce information and put in what we actually have to have in. So I'll put a point there. I'll click on this point, which means that the next time I move my Illustrator point, it's not going to affect this first line. So the first thing I'm going to do is going to put in that tiny little horn. So, but I'm going to exaggerate it, and again, I am going to use sort of a stylized image of it. So again, toggle, twist, and I will adjust these afterwards. Then I know after that, look at how close that the main horn comes off of there. So I'm going to really exaggerate this thing. And the other thing I'm going to do with it is I want to have a relationship to that first little horn. So I'm going to sort of move way up here And again, I'm going to sort of mimic that angle that I've used on the horn. I'm going to click on here, and then I'm going to bring it back down. And we're going to make this obviously quite a bit thicker. So you see what's going on here is I'm really trying to keep control of my point. I'm toggling to try and get my thickness. So if you sort of have a look at this, what we're trying to do is have a consistency of thickness, right? So we start off very thin, like the point on the rhino, and then it flares to thicker. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try and get some of the a sense of the size of the rhino's head. So with that one, all I'm really going to do is take what I have, and I'm going to work just a little bit out, and then I'm just going to round that out, because we know it is kind of flat looking, but it's not that flat looking. So once I have that, my next line, I won't actually click on the point. All I'm doing is then extending this line up, and this is going to really make the next part of the head. And I'm actually going to continue a little bit longer than the actual banner on this one. So we know it gets thicker as it goes up, but not a lot if you look at that head. So I'm going to bend this, and that will give me roughly not a bad shape for the rhino's head. And then I kind of know at this point all that we're really missing. So I'm going to close this off, and at this point it doesn't matter what I do over here on this head. It really is it really is just kind of going to be bleeding off the banner anyways. So I'll bring that down. Then I have to sort of figure out as this comes up. So I'm going to leave those points open, and I'm going to work right off of this one. So what I'm going to do is just, I'm going to give this rhino almost the simplest sort of shaped ear that I could possibly think of. We do know that it is a big sort of, it kind of flares out. So I'll keep that really, really simple. And then I will sort of bring this line back here. So relatively, there's the shape of our rhino, and it's not as easy as it appears, because I've worked out some of this with my sketches. So the next thing I want to do is I really want to have a look at a way to simplify this eye and really have the same sort of style eye across all three animals. So I'm going to notice how really small that is. So I'm going to start just by doing a flat eyelid across here, and then I'm just going to bend it up, and this is going to become the rhino's eye. And I'm just going to now introduce sort of I'm going to dip into my other color, and then I am going to sort of reach in here with my circle tool, and I'm just going to do a very, very small circle so we can sort of see how an eye might actually work with this. So that is pretty good right there. Now I'm going to grab all of it and figure out, okay, I'm going to reduce it a little bit in size, so that one of the things we have to do is make sure that this thing is going to fit on a banner. So I've jumped ahead, obviously. I decided I didn't like the ears after all, so I gave the rhino a couple stylized ears. I protruded the horns a little bit more. It certainly is not perfect. I could work on sort of the thickness of the horn a little bit, but what I've done is now I've introduced a background for my banner. I've really positioned the head so that it fits in there okay, and then the final thing will be to use a really simple type technique that will be based on overlapping type, as opposed to trying to find perfect spots to put our titling. Okay, so we have a rhino, and I have cropped him or her so she fits in our banner. Okay, and now you can see that what I've done is introduce. I grabbed my text. So, like I said, what we will try and do with this one is really sort of try to incorporate overlaying text. So instead of just simply trying to move the rhino around, which is fairly easy because it's one of the heavier animals in the animal kingdom, we will actually try to sort of overlap a little bit of text, not so much that we lose what we're doing, but as you can sort of see, I've got my text selected. So primarily with banners, you do want to try and get the information on there, but still leave yourself some space. So, I'll try and work with same sort of thing, a margin on both sides. But with this one, it really is just a short bit of text. So all I'm doing is I'm lining up my headline. When I do that, there's a couple things that I'm going to there's a couple things that I'm going to try and avoid. So one of them is, I know, for instance, the rhino has a couple very obvious characteristics. So the last thing I'm going to do is sort of pop the type right over top of the horns, because that literally tells everything you need to know that this is a rhino. And even though we've sort of stripped away all the bumps and the actual realness of the rhino, the simple length of that arc and those horns is going to give us what we need. So the second thing is, if I'm doing a headline, my headline is primarily going to go at the top of the page. I'm not going to do that because, again, I think the ears sort of give away a little bit about the rhino. So all I'm doing is relatively popping it somewhere where I think I can overlap and it's not going to take away from, see, I'm not going to put it there because I want to see the end of the horn. So really, this becomes the best place to do it. So, if we get rid of our guides, you can sort of see, there we go. We've got a little bit of overlap here, a little bit of overlap there, and that actually works pretty well. So now I'm going to jump ahead and look at the other two animals and banners. Okay, so you can sort of see there's the three banners together. So some of the key things to really pay attention to is really flat art, right? Very elongated, stretched figures, simplifying the information to the very sort of minimal. The next thing is you can sort of see that I have moved the headlines around. Really what I'm after, instead of just making them all sort of line up on the left side, there's such different shapes to each one of the animals that really where I arrived was trying to have some overlap with the animals, trying to keep them at the same height so that when you see the banners together, you'll notice that right away the design system is that the name of the animal is in the same place on the banner. The third thing is a little bit of overlap and the same sort of positioning for the body copy. So if you see down below, each one of them is relatively the same length. I haven't gone in and fixed all my rags here yet, but what you're looking at is a design system that now we can look at and go, okay, right, so I see how the three colors sort of work together. So there's the orange, the green, and the blue, and relatively we have three different backgrounds and then a couple common colors and the green color for the rhino. But the visual impression is that each one of the banners is different, but in many ways it's the same. So you'll see that I literally used the same eye for the elephant, giraffe, and the rhino. Really kept everything to sort of two colors. kept the type in the same place, found ways to find as many elements to line up as possible. So that's all part of a design system, and a design system really is there to make things easy for you. It's once you understand the design system you're using, the next banner is going to be much easier, and you could imagine where it goes from here. The second set of banners, you can see the technique that I want you to try is to actually take the information, the names, and instead of doing them in white, you're going to choose a complementary color. So the job or the task for you guys is to create your own set of animals, not necessarily these three. You want to find 3 colors, so a tight color palette like I have here, and then the 2 techniques of type is the top ones you're going to have the type overlap on top of the animal, and on the second one you're going to make the type large enough that it's actually going to go behind the animal. So you want to try and position it so you can sort of understand, you know, between the image and the actual animal, you should be able to, or between the image and the type, you should be able to figure out what it says. So we can take a few more liberties and get a little bit more playful with the type on these ones. And you can sort of see what I've done with these ones is really sort of push them into the background by using the sort of 3 colors, and it sort of gives us a much sort of bolder, kind of funkier feel to it. So with this in-class exercise, you're going to choose 3 animals. It can be any 3 animals you want. Try and make sure that they have some characteristics that distinguish themselves, that it'll be easy to replicate. So imagine something with just a basic head is going to be hard to do, but if you did, you know, if you did like a crocodile, that would be, or an alligator, that would be fairly easy to do. You also want to have areas that are big enough that you can bleed them onto the images. And then really kind of using a distorted, you know, very smooth line, so you're taking out as much information as you can to just get the bare minimum across, but you're kind of using a flared technique, so lines that have some style to it, thicks and thins, using flat colors, and then looking at the 2 different type approaches.